The liberal global elite have descended from their private jets into a luxurious little town high up in the Swiss Alps for the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, where they hope to plan how all the rest of us will live. But if you say that, you will be called a crazy, right-wing conspiracy theorist, unless you're John Kerry.
When you stop and think about it, it's pretty extraordinary that we, select group of human beings, because of whatever touched us at some point in our lives, are able to sit in a room and come together and actually talk about saving the planet. I mean, it's so almost extraterrestrial to think about, quote, saving the planet. And if you said that to most people, they think you're just a crazy tree-hugging, lefty, liberal, do-gooder, whatever, and there's no relationship. But really, that's where we are.
For the record, John, I do not think that you people are do-gooders. I think you are do-badders, okay? I am half convinced that you are all extraterrestrials, but I am not convinced about the do-gooder thing. What I'm most convinced about, that John Kerry said, is that these people are elite. They are a select group of people, well, the select, past the caviar, and they want to become the masters of our collective future. But if you say that, you will be called a crazy right-wing conspiracy theorist, unless you're the founder of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab.
What does it need to master the future? I think to have a platform where all stakeholders of global society are engaged. Governments, business, civil societies, the young generation, and I could go on, I think is a first step to meet all the challenges.
This is how we will master the future. So what we know from their own words is they're elites. They meet up in a wealthy, inaccessible ski resort town surrounded by the Swiss military and a private police force. And they intend to reorder the entire world. If you acknowledge all those things to celebrate them, that's perfectly fine. Then you are an insightful participant in the progressive society of the future. But if you point out those facts to criticize them, you are a conspiracist kook and a danger to mankind. A lot of kooky stuff being talked about at the World Economic Forum. This is my favorite, though. They talk about how we're going to eat the bugs. It's not a conspiracy theory. That's from the World Economic Forum website. They talk about how we're not going to get to drive our cars. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's from the World Economic Forum website. They talk about how we're not going to own anything. We're going to have no property, and we're going to be really, really happy about that. Not a conspiracy theory, from the World Economic Forum website. But the agenda item that always seems to pop up, not just among the Davos crowds, specifically at the World Economic Forum, but it always pops up among the liberal elite. Overpopulation. Overpopulation, the idea that there are too many people in the world, we got to stop having any more babies, we got to maybe hurry along the people who are already in the world to their final destination here. That remains a top agenda item, even as it has been disproven time and time again, for 50 years now, disproven. The World Economic Forum admits this, that overpopulation has been kind of disproven, and then doubles down on it anyway. They say, even as birth rates decline, overpopulation remains a global challenge. And they have this graph here. It says, Malthus didn't see this one coming, referring to the Malthusian idea that there are too many people in the world and we need to reduce the population. They say the vision of a post-apocalyptic overpopulated world has been a favorite nightmare scenario of science fiction writers and filmmakers for decades, but data from a variety of sources, including the UN and the World Bank, indicate that the total number of live births is falling around the world, including in developing nations and developed nations. Some commentators have suggested the decrease in fertility rates is good news for our descendants. In previous generations, national birth rates were high. However, factors such as new medicine and improved access to education for women have dropped fertility rates. Despite this, though, some regions are still experiencing significant population growth. They're talking about Africa, they're talking about parts of Asia. And so this is a really big problem, and we've got to take care of that. No one who complains about overpopulation has ever been the good guy, ever in history. If you are complaining about overpopulation, you are on the bad team, okay? None of the people who complain about overpopulation are ever volunteering themselves to take a ticket off the ship, right? It's always that someone else shouldn't have life. It's always that someone else should hurry along and die. It's never that they themselves want to do that. They want to go to parties in Davos, and they want to have nice drinks, and they want to have a bunch of hookers, apparently. According to the reports coming out of Davos, there is just an army of prostitutes descending on the town because it's a big party, and there's more money than sense going around, definitely more money than virtue. And so while they have their fun and they eat their fancy foods and they drink their fancy drinks and they do various activities with their fancy ladies of the night, they talk about how you should not even have the right to live. Forget about the right to a gas stove. Forget about the right to eat beef instead of crickets. Forget about the right to drive your truck instead of some stupid electric car. Even the right to live, they are going after. And it's all the usual suspects. And what's amazing is not just the craziest things that they say, but that they try to ground their agenda in political commentary that seems to have a kernel of truth. A great example of this, St. Al Gore took to Davos to explain why we've got to cut back on the oil subsidies.
Enough already, enough. And I don't want to get sidetracked onto what needs to happen, but we need to scale up climate finance, but we need desperately to scale down anti-climate finance. And we are still subsidizing the burning of fossil fuels globally at a rate 42 times larger than the subsidies for the shift toward renewables and EVs, et cetera. We need new leadership at the World Bank. We need them to scale up the leverage and vastly increase the amounts that are committed. And we need to rein in the anti-climate activities of the fossil industry.
So a lot of bluster, a lot of we should do this, we should do that. We need to rein in the oil, and we need to rein in the people who support oil, and we need to shut you up, and we need everyone to go along with my very unpopular agenda. Sure, that's typical politics. But he made a positive claim here. The claim was that we subsidize oil. And if you just heard that fact, you'd say, well, that seems kind of strange. Oil's a very profitable industry. Why is it that governments around the world, to the tune of, $500 billion a year, are subsidizing oil? That seems corrupt. We should probably stop that. Until you ask the basic question, okay, sure, we subsidize oil. Why? Why do we subsidize oil? And the reason we subsidize oil is so that poor people don't freeze to death in the winter. That's why we subsidize oil. We don't subsidize oil just because we like the cut of the jib of the CEO of ExxonMobil. The people clamoring for the oil subsidies are people who are poor or advocating on behalf of the poor because people can't afford to heat their homes. People can't afford to fill their gas tanks. Why are we subsidizing oil? We have a national strategic petroleum reserve. Is that a subsidy of oil? Well, it is the state purchasing a lot of oil, but it's for national defense. Which of those things do you want to get rid of? You want the poor people to freeze to death? Maybe they do. I mean, if you're worried about overpopulation, then maybe you do. You say, well, these people, they just need to go away. I think of Yuval Harari. He's one of the contributors to the World Economic Forum. Some people have called him a kind of philosopher of the World Economic Forum. Yuval Harari has said that in the future, there's just going to be all these useless people out there who are just sucking up energy. And he was asked, how are we going to deal with these useless people? And his answer was drugs and video games. Ply them full of drugs, keep them kind of busy, keep them kind of happy, get them out of the way. That is the view of humanity from the so-called do-gooders, as John Kerry calls them, at the World Economic Forum. And why do they view humanity this way? Because they're standing way high up in the Alps. That's why. It goes back to that old wisdom from G.K. Chesterton, the old Father Brown stories. Say, don't pray from the tops of buildings. Don't pray from heights. Because from heights, people look very, very small. People look like bugs, and then you end up wanting to feed them bugs and wanting them to go away and viewing them as a kind of pest that needs to be exterminated because of the peril of overpopulation. When you're down on the ground, when you are a grounded person, when you're looking up, then you can see the heavens and you can see that people are really people and they're full-sized and they look a lot like you. They don't look a lot like the people who go to Davos, at least not to the people who go to Davos. Those people are extraterrestrial as far as Kerry and the rest of those people are concerned.